Hello and welcome to my demonstration video controlling external synths on the Sonicware Liven XFM. So, what I have here is a small setup of 3 synthesizers and some other peripherals. I'm going to describe how they're all connected to each other. I'm going to describe how they're configured, and I'm going to then go into using those to make a small beat using the Liven XFM as the sequencer. So first, what hardware is here? Well, Sonicware Liven XFM, the MIDI solutions quad through. This is a bus powered device. I also have a Kenton wall powered device, which I would consider to be a more reliable solution. But the one that I have has 25 outputs, so it's way too big for a MIDI setup, a miniature setup like this. 2 synthesizers. This is the Korg Volca keys. This is a 3-part paraphonic synthesizer. Logically, it's a mono synth. It has its own built-in sequencer. It has a built-in delay. This is the Korg Volca drum. This is a digital drum synthesizer with 6 voices. All the voices have identical architecture, but they're pretty flexible, covering a wide range of sounds. Equally, the sequencer, it includes pattern chaining and a few other features. Both are relatively interesting and relatively simple devices, but I'm going to be controlling them through the Liven XFM. Off camera, there is also a mixer. It is a Xenix 1002B. It's an old Behringer mixer that I used to use for live performances. So now I've turned the devices on. Let's talk a little bit about how they're configured. Firstly, let's look at the MIDI settings on the Liven XFM. So, transmit CC. I have the Liven XFM set not to transmit CC, and I'll tell you why. Each of the knobs and their secondary functions have a certain MIDI CC parameter that they can transmit, and these are the same parameters that get parameter locked when you parameter lock a given step. Firstly, when you parameter lock in this way, the CCs that are sent you don't have explicit control over. They simply correspond to whatever the manufacturer chose. The CCs received by the other devices, again, they don't have any configurability. They are simply whatever the manufacturer chose. So firstly, there may be no overlap between the CCs across devices, and there certainly will not be an obvious mapping between the MIDI CCs. So it doesn't particularly make sense to try and record any sort of parameter automation through the Liven XFM. There are some tricks we could do. For example, we could use the motion sequencers on these devices to record parameter automation, so as when the sequence is playing, even though there's no sound, there's some other variation happening. But for now, we're going to just leave it like this. Next, transmit clock I have on. Because clock transmission is on, the sequences on all the devices will run, and equally importantly, any clock synced elements, such as the delay on the Volca keys, will also run at the correct clock. So I want clock syncing. If there was nothing to synchronize from a clock perspective, I could simply not transmit the clock, and that would be sufficient because this would be playing the notes. It wouldn't matter if the sequencer was running or not, but where you have MIDI syncable elements, it's useful to have. Next, nothing else very interesting to show there. MIDI channel. So each of the tracks has a MIDI channel that it transmits on. I have these set to track 1, 11, track 2 is 12, 3 is 13, 4 is 14. I have set up the 2 Volcas to be track 11 and track 12 respectively. So I can use track 1 on here to control this device, track 2 on here to control this device. Note for now though, not only am I controlling this device, I'm also playing the internal sound here. As I mentioned in another video, the mutes actually don't work on a MIDI event level, they work on an audio level. So what that means is, if I mute tracks 1 and 2, so what you're hearing now is only the external synthesizer. You're not hearing the internal sound engine. This is quite an inconvenient thing because it means that I cannot use the track mutes here as a performance feature when controlling the external synthesizers. So previously I had assumed this would be possible, and instead I turned the volume down on that part, and then I discovered that the mutes actually don't affect the MIDI events, so it is what it is. One of the reasons why I placed the external synths on tracks 1 and 2 is because of the way voice allocation works on this synthesizer. The priority for notes is given highest to track 4, then less to track 3, less to track 2, less to track 1. What does that mean? Well, it means if notes are playing on track 4 and it needs to play more notes than there are voices, of which there are 6, it will steal a note from track 1. And if you request another voice, it will steal another note from track 1 until there are no voices being used on track 1. Then it will steal from track 2. When those are used up, it'll steal from track 3, and when those are used up, well, that means that we've used all 6 voices or more on track 4. So because of this, if I place the external synths on the lower numbered tracks, then I'm never going to have my usage of those external synths stealing voices from my other synthesizers. And there is no polyphony limit in the sequencer, it's only on the voices for the synthesizer engine. So if I were to play these lower tracks using the synth engine and use too many voices up here, you would hear voices being stolen, but since they're muted, that's irrelevant to our use. So what I'm going to be able to do therefore is use one track to play this, one track to play this, and also have 2 other tracks internal to this synthesizer to play. So let's see what happens firstly when I hit play. So a little bit confusing. What you can hear happening is the demo song pattern number 1, bank number 1 playing on here with the first 2 parts muted, but the MIDI events are still being sent to these synthesizers. Additionally, these synthesizers sequencers are running, so they're playing back the notes that they wanted to play in addition to what's being transmitted to them. So 2 things we're going to do. First, clear pattern. So now nothing is playing on this device, only something playing from these 2 devices, so that's good. We can mute those first 2 tracks. Now, what you could do is you could mess around with MIDI clock settings, but I find the easiest thing to do is just to clear the patterns on these synthesizers. So now when I hit play, we don't hear anything, and this is what we want. What's happening is MIDI clock is being transmitted, so the tempo sync delay is going to function if it's enabled. At the moment it's not actually enabled, but we could enable it if we wished. And we now have the capacity to play internal voices on the Liven XFM and external voices here. So with that in mind, let's go and let's play some drums in. So firstly, I think I would like more bars of drums. So what I've got is 64 steps. This is actually only a 16-step sequencer, so I'm actually using kind of 4 patterns worth of storage here. So that's already a win that we have for doing it this way. Because this is a drum synth, it's not intended to play chromatically, so I'll need to find the notes on the keyboard corresponding to the drum parts. So here they are, they're C, D, E, F, G, A. Okay? I'm not sure if I like those drum sounds, so I'm going to load another kit. Another one. It's a bit better. Okay, I like that sort of trappy sound. So now I'm going to turn a metronome on over here. Okay, so let me try and record something. Last bar. So I actually played a couple of notes slightly early. I'm going to turn up the metronome a little bit so I can hear it more clearly. So I think in the third part, the last one actually. So this note, going to place it there. Okay, so what we have now is a 64-step pattern, and to make things possibly a little bit more interesting, I'm going to use the randomization feature. So rand step, I'm going to randomize in 16-step chunks. In other words, it's going to randomly pick one of the 4 pages of this pattern, and I'm going to enable randomization. So let me play. So this is now the 4th page, this is the 3rd page, this is the 2nd page, 2nd page again. So we've already got a little more variation than we might otherwise expect. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so I might try and record in some hats. Because I want to record this linearly, I'm going to turn randomization off, and this one. I might turn up some swing. Turn randomization back on. Okay, so randomization is one of the features that I'm able to enable. I'm also able to use the stutter feature, so this allows me to repeat a particular step multiple times. So if I turn stutter on, it replaces randomization, only one runs at a time. Okay, so that's an interesting performance feature. I'm going to go back to randomization because that's what I'm looking for here. Okay, I think that works perfectly well. So now let's think about what we're going to do with the other 2 parts that we have here. I'm thinking maybe we'll play a bass on this, and then we'll play something chordal on the Liven XFM, and then maybe we'll play a lead over the top. Okay, so let's go to track 1. So this, I now need to design a sound. Since I want a bass, I want something monophonic, so I'm going to put this in unison mode. Detune a little. Okay, close the filter a bit. So now I have a bass sound. If I'm unhappy with how the volume of that works with respect to the other sound, let me play. I think it is a little bit quiet. One thing I can do is turn down the volume of this, which I might. Also, what I can do is I can affect the line in gain. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. Close the filter a little more. Okay, so now I can play something in here, maybe let's say D. Okay, something like that. So I'm gonna go for a 64-step pattern like before. I'm just gonna let it play once around. I guess I haven't mentioned this in the past, but there is a pre-count feature which will allow it to count a certain number of beats in before the sequence starts playing. This sounds like a good idea, especially with the metronome on, but what I've found is as soon as the first beat starts, exactly on that one, if you try and play a note exactly there, if you play it fractionally early, it doesn't get recorded. Only if you play it late will it get recorded. If the sequencer is already running, if you play a beat fraction early or a fraction late, it will still land on the right step. So it's much easier to play things in the time that you want to play them if you're not using pre-count and the sequencer is already free running. So I'm going to get the sequencer free running. My metronome is off. Third bar. Playing on two external devices. I have the capacity, as well as just adjusting the string that I did, to adjust a small number of other things. One of them that I can adjust is the velocity. So I can, if I recorded from a velocity sensitive keyboard, velocity would have been recorded in here. Velocity isn't going to have been recorded, or rather it's going to be the default velocity, because that was simply what gets recorded when I play from this keyboard. It's a fixed velocity. Other things that I can do is I can set probability per step. So if there are certain notes that I only wanted to play on certain occasions, so let's see this little last sequence, I might decide that this note, oops, sorry, that doesn't make sense. This note I want to occur only 50% of the time. This one I want to occur 75% of the time. This one I want to occur 100% of the time. Just like all of the parameter locking, this knob represents the track level value. So if I don't parameter lock and I turn this value down, that will apply a reduced probability to every note in the entire sequence. So let's have a look at this one. Maybe I'll do something similar. So this last one, oops, let's go 50%, 75%, and 100%. Leave the knob at 100%. So let's play the sequence again. you heard there, it skipped one of the notes that I recorded. So that skipped 2 notes that time. So you can hear that the probability can add a little bit of variation going on here. I think I'm going to turn this This is working. So let's move over to the first part that's actually going to be played in this device. This, I think I want to be something chordal. So let me go to just the library engine and maybe let's go to keys, see how this works for us. Let's play. I'm going to be okay to have my sequence running in 8th beats. So I'm going to record something. I've got 32 steps of 8th beats, so that's going to be 4 bars, just like the rest of them are 4 bars, but it's going to be condensed over 2 pages. It just makes it a little bit easier to look at. Another thing which you may or may not have noticed, I don't have tie turned on. Not having tie turned on means that when I'm playing notes in, if I play and hold a note, it will only record it for the step that it was triggered on. For this playing that I'm doing now, it probably makes more sense to be able to hold these things if I want to hold them. So I'm going to enable that. I'm going to start the sequence playing, and when it comes back to the 1, I'm going to try and play something in. Second bar. Portamento runs. So adjustment. Okay, so that's Portamento enabled. I'm going to keep going through and finding a sound I like. Okay, so hopefully that's illustrated how we can control external devices here. It's illustrated a little something about how you might go about performing that, some of the limitations, and some of the things which work well. I think that brings this demonstration to an end. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come and watch some more of my videos. And for now, goodbye.